One Friday morning in 2009 in Surrey, England, a body was found inside of a wheelie bin. The rubbish men were just doing their job. They were coming along to take wheelie bins, putting them into the back of their lorries and driving off. But they came across this one wheelie bin which was extremely heavy, and they refused to actually take it. They just said, no, it's too heavy, we're not going to take it, and they carried on to the next house. 3 weeks later, the landlord actually came by and he discovered a human foot hanging out of the wheelie bin. This is the shocking true story of Melanie Warner, a 30-year-old female who was discovered inside of a wheelie bin. This true story will send shivers down your body, so make sure you watch to the very end and hit subscribe if you want to see more true crime videos. Melanie Warner was a 30-year-old South African female, and she was dating a guy called Peter, who was actually German. Melanie and Peter started dating very quickly after they both met. They both were fond of each other. They both kind of fell for each other really fast. They both thought that each one was perfect for each other. And in fact, they actually got married very quickly after they started dating. On the outside, this marriage was perfect. No one knew there was any real issues in this marriage. But in fact, the marriage wasn't perfect. If anything, it was far from perfect, because Peter had allegedly had many affairs on Melanie, and multiple times he kept seeing other women all the time behind Melanie's back. And at first she had no idea about it, but it became so frequent that actually Melanie did find out about one of his recent affairs. In 2006, Melanie actually confronted Peter about one of his recent affairs. They had a huge argument about this affair. Peter was denying everything, and Melanie was confident that she found out about this affair. She was arguing, and they were arguing together for ages, all day long, and nothing really came of it. Peter wasn't agreeing to it, Melanie wasn't backing down, so she decided to go and get some rest. She went back to her bed and put a sleep mask on so she could just kind of forget about it and get some rest, because she was really stressed about this current affair she just found out about. At this point, this is where this story instantly gets crazy, and again, this is very shocking, but whilst Melanie was actually asleep in her bed, Peter must have been so angry that he was accused of having an affair that while she was asleep with her sleeping mask on, he actually came up to her while she was in bed with a griddle pan and actually whacked her around the head while she was asleep. This pan was extremely heavy and did some serious damage to Melanie. But not only that, he then got a plastic bag, put it over Melanie's head, and then put her body in a sleeping bag so no one would know where she was. So at this point, he's just killed his wife with a griddle pan. He's panicking because he doesn't want to get caught with this. You know, he wants to get away with this. He doesn't want anyone to know. He's just put his wife's body in a sleeping bag, and he's just hit her around the head with a griddle pan. Obviously, he's been angry about being accused of having an affair. That's why he's done this. And now he's really starting to panic of where he should put her body and what's he gonna do, which is where this story gets even more twisted. Peter actually went online and ordered a large lockable freezer where he was going to actually plan on keeping Melanie's body in, so the body would stay in one type of place and wouldn't send off smells. Buying a big enough freezer so he could freeze her body so no one would know where she was and she was frozen. Now, of course, neighbors are going to wonder where Melanie is gone. They're going to realize she's not around no more, and a lot of people are going to start questioning where Melanie is gone. So Peter actually thought of a plan to go and tell his neighbors that, do you know what, they split up and she's left the country and they're not really going to see her around no more. That was one of the first things he did after he obviously murdered his wife. He went to his neighbors' houses and just made them aware that they're not going to see Melanie around anymore and she's left the country. That is what he told all of his neighbors. Now, he told his neighbors that Melanie was out of the country and they split up, but he told her friends and her family that she actually had a freak accident, and he tried everything he could do to save her. He tried CPR and nothing was working. So he's told neighbor one thing and then told his friends and family completely different. At this point, Peter was panicking. He didn't know what to tell anyone else. Melanie's family and parents actually were coming back to the UK, or tried coming back to the UK for obviously their daughter's funeral, but Peter had something different in mind. Peter told them not to come to the funeral, and in fact he was actually going to go to them to prove that their daughter had passed away. In fact, what he did was fly out to South Africa to meet Melanie's parents and took an urn with him and told them that she'd been cremated and that she's gone. But this is just crazy because the urn wasn't Melanie. The urn was actually just ash from his barbecue. This story is just sickening and gets even worse from this point onwards. Time went on and Peter carried on living his life. He actually had over 3 years of getting away with this. He carried on, went back to his normal life, I assume he started dating other people, he carried on with his work, he carried on doing everything in his normal life. After he just murdered his wife, his family now are aware and think she's been cremated. Everyone kind of turned weirdly a blind eye to this, like no one really questioned anything. In fact, for 3 years straight, no one really knew. But obviously Peter still had her body in the house and needed to do something. And what he did next is sickening. He wanted to move out of this property, but he had a big package which he needed to get rid of, which was obviously Melanie's body. So he decided to actually put this body into the wheelie bin outside of his house. Melanie's body was under this house for over 3 years, and Peter was just praying that if he put this body inside of a wheelie bin, that the bin men would come along as normal, doing their daily routine, and take the body and put it into a landfill, and that would be it. He'd be hands off with the body. No one would ever find out ever again. This went on for 3 years. He kept this body for 3 years and froze it, and decided when he wanted to move out, now was the time to get rid of it, and that was how he did it. He put it in the wheelie bin and prayed that it would get removed. But it didn't get removed, and this is actually what happened. The bin men came along doing their normal routine, doing the bins of the neighborhood, and they refused to take the bin. They refused to take the bin because it was so heavy. They tried putting it, but it was just ridiculously heavy, and they didn't have enough time to mess around with bins that were too heavy. So it actually then took 3 weeks after Peter had moved out for the body to be discovered. So not only was the body then in a wheelie bin for 3 weeks, it actually was found by the landlord, who came along 3 weeks later and found Melanie's foot inside of the wheelie bin hanging out. After the body was discovered, obviously the landlord rang the police. The police came along, they investigated everything. Keep in mind this was 3 years later, and their first suspect was obviously the partner, Peter. So they went to Peter and kind of questioned him, and he didn't deny it. He actually said it was self-defense. But Peter forgot one major element of self-defense, and that was Melanie actually had a sleeping mask on. So that proved that Peter wasn't acting in self-defense, and Melanie was asleep and was out of her body. He didn't take the sleep mask off of her. He actually left it on the body, and when the police discovered the body, they would have realized that she was asleep in this moment that she passed away, and there was no way she was fighting towards Peter. So Peter completely messed up his story and found out straight away that he was lying. When this case obviously went to jury, Peter claimed that he lost the plot and he was acting in self-defense because Melanie hit him with a rolling pin, and he accidentally acted in self-defense and lost the plot, and he claimed it was manslaughter, not murder. After a very tiring court case for Melanie's family and also a long case in general, Peter was found guilty of murder and now has life in jail. This truly is a shocking story of Melanie Warner and how she was for 3 years frozen, and then the way she was left this world was inside of a wheelie bin. Is really disturbing, and I really, my heart does go out for the family. If you want to see more true crime stories, make sure you hit subscribe, as I post every single week.